Judging from my bio, you'll find that I'm really a kind of a strange animal. Yes, I can call myself a diplomat or a former diplomat. I'm also kind of a sort of a scholar, but it's also working for a government. So we're all an institute with government background. And then again, I see, so what a combination. This guy is working on U.S. China and also working on in China and India and whatever. That's I think, because we are living, my understanding or my explanation is because we are living in such an interrelated world. So people like us have to expand, we're forced or compelled to expand our research areas or interests sometimes, even though we are not sure whether it's a good idea. But that is life. That is, people like us are being asked to give views, to write papers and do whatever, the government or whatever, would like us to do. So, but I think I was very impressed by Clay's sort of commercials, and also very much privileged, and it's a great pleasure to speak with you and share my views and about the relationship. Before I get started to that topic, I would just like to ask any of you who are here in the audience to know that this year for the relationship between China and India, any significant event, or what is it special in 2010? I just want to know how much you know about India. Otherwise, I can. If not, I can just stop. Anybody know? This year marks, we say, the 60th anniversary of the founding of the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and India. And remember that was 1950, and 1950 was the second year when New China was founded, and India was just established its sort of independence, 4 years, despite a kind of a bloody sort of a partition between, really leading to the establishment of two countries, India and Pakistan, which still they find it very difficult to get along with. But that is the sort of a very sketchy, sort of background of the relationship. And by looking back at that past 6 decades, the relationship, I would divide the relationship, this at 60 years into 3 phases by citing 3 sort of terms, 3 terms in Hindi. I'm not sure whether anybody here can speak Hindi, otherwise I can just, yeah. In the first phase, we called ourselves, it's a period of Chini Indi Bye Bye, which means China and India. Chinese and India are brothers. That which literally says that the relationship is very good. Yeah, they are brothers. And that period, of course, started with the first day of the establishment of diplomatic relations, leading to another major event. That is, say, at the end of 1950s and the beginning of 1960s, India and China had a short but quite, I think, bloody border conflict. 1952, very brief, 2 months, 1 month, less than, fewer than 1 month. So by that time, that comes in, starting from 1962, then we had I would call the second phase of the relationship. By that time, because of boundary, dispute, because of that, and because more importantly, I think the Indians failed. They were defeated. They lost that border war. So then they got another term that is a Chini Indian bye-bye, no relationship. So nothing happened, and it means that almost, I think, the relationship, the diplomatic relationship, was downgraded to the extent that literally they call back, there were no ambassadors. No ambassadors. They did not say we're downgraded the relationship to, under the ambassador level, but they just called the ambassadors back and without sending an ambassador, for consultations. Of course, after that, in China, there's something different, dramatic happened, the so-called Cultural Revolution, but that did not That period leading to, I think, up to the end of roughly 1980s to early 1990s. Then when the relationship between China and India started to normalize slowly, gradually, and then the areas of cooperation started expanded, then to the extent that the trade volumes, bilateral has been increased. So people call this period as China and India like doing business, buy and buy. Yeah, you buy something doing business, okay? Up to, I think, the current period. Now, what will happen in the next sort of years around that will come back later. So we have 3 periods, so 3 phases of development. Roughly, I think I divided the first period, we have around 10 years, less than 10 years. You start, 10 years, a little bit more, because the relationship started to sour, I think, by 1958 something, yeah. Then by, I think, 1980s, late 1980s, then we got around, almost 20 years around, more or less, of course. Particularly, I think, shortly after the boundary disputes, there was almost nothing happened. The Indians insisted that we're not going to talk you anything with Chinese over anything unless and until the boundary issues was resolved, which means literally they put the preconditions, and everyone knows that if we could have solved the problem of boundary, the 2 countries would not go into fight. And gradually, of course, the relation is being picked up. And then the question is asked, what kind of lessons, we could learn from that rough or ups and downs relation? How could the 2 countries which believe or which thought that could develop, as close as brothers, would fight such a bitter war on boundaries? In other words, these beliefs, these sort of, I would not call them illusion, but whatever you call, yeah, that thought that because given the history, given the sort of similar experience of both China and India suffered sort of colonialism, being the sort of good feelings when Chinese were suffered, so under the difficult period when the Japanese aggressed and the Indians sent some military sort of missions to help the Chinese, and also beautiful, words sent by the leaders, and the historical even in terms of, the religious, interactions, the cultural interactions. So why? This is a question, I think. And also, I think the first few years when the relationship was established, it is also interesting. Very important to note that the 2 countries, together with Myanmar, or we call it Burma, co-sponsored a very important, 5 very important 5 principles. We call it 5 principles of peaceful coexistence. For that is also very much significant, which is believed that as a kind of contribution to to the international relation, that how the country, state-to-state relations should be governed, like respect of mutual respect, sovereignty, independence, and mutual mutual respect, and non-interfering internal affairs, which is very important, still relevant, right? But these principles, these ideas, were not being adequate enough to address that, the relationship. So it was, to some extent, personally, kind of irony, right? And then no relationship, no talk, nothing happened. Then why, after such a long time, it happened? By the end of 1980s and beginning of 90s, and then the relationship started to move ahead, to improve. The boundary issues was there. It had not been solved. Even today, there are some progress, I have to point out, right? But still, an issue. And what has happened? And then the relationship in the 3rd phase, as I said, buy, trade, is it enough? The increase of trade relationship, economic and trade interactions, that development, is it adequate enough to bring the relationship back, to the 1st phase, or is it going to be Or is it, are these, the trade, this factor, this issue itself, able to sort of help the two countries to deal with an increasingly sort of complicated relationship in the context, in today's context. And as Clay mentioned, rightly, I think, in his remarks, opening remarks, there are some tension or perceived tensions between the two countries. So I would say the relationship in the past 60 years, if I can add some perspective, is that maybe one lesson is that the relationship was too much sort of affected by the overall situation in the world, because we all remember that is the impact of Cold War. And I would also argue that the rapprochement or the improvement of relationship between China and India, starting from 1980s to 1990s, was also partly because of the Cold War, because by that time, everybody knows that the Cold War has ended, right? And then the two countries got to figure out how to face, how to face up a kind of a sort of, we call it post-Cold War situation, and how to work out their problems and difficulties. And now the challenges is that we are living now, both China and India are rising very fast. We're talking about BRICS, emerging economies. We're talking about, the cooperation, but also people are talking about a lot of conflict. Competitions. How to sort of put the relationship in a normal or steady track? This is a question I think not only puzzled policymakers both in China and India, but also I think fascinating theories, international theories. So there's, you may find there's at least I can say 3 schools. One is talking about that so-called this very, I think, optimistic. Talking about, they say it is possible to bring the relationship to some extent back to the first phase. So there's a word term, a word they coined the Qingda. China, India, they put together the term the Qingda, right? And they say the two countries, being the largest developing countries, they share a lot of common ground and facing a lot of similar tasks. They can work together to promote the overall interests of the developing countries, and therefore that will help them to build up a better relationship. This is one school, which is I put them in one extreme, very much optimistic, right? So cooperation, no problem. And there are, of course, the other extreme, as always, school, they argue that, wow, come on, you look at the relationship, the history, the past 60 years, and look at the reality. They have so many problems, right? The problems, the boundary issues that you said have not been solved, and they have problems in the region. There's a kind of competition for sort of sphere interest. They have problems dealing with Pakistan, they are dealing with other smaller countries in the region, in South Asia, and also, gradually in East Asia. India's role, the influence, the interest that are expanding in Southeast Asia, which China feels that this is becoming something I think India feels, it's not so much relevant to India. Of course, India certainly has its interest in terms of trade and in terms of cultural relationship. We know that the Hindu culture do have interest, influence in that part of the world. And then in between, there's a certain kind of quite realistic or pragmatic views that the relationship is very complicated, but this relationship is very much important. I would say that the government position, the position stance or views of the two governments is quite, I think, realistic and pragmatic. They say they recognize that there are certain areas where China and India can cooperate. Look at what they did in Copenhagen and what they have been advocating in terms of sort of building we call fair, reasonable international order, giving more voice of international, developing countries. So there are a lot of commonalities. It is also interesting that I was told by my colleagues that, who are dealing with India, and that when they do a kind of a joint communique, joint statement, these big issues, when the leaders come in visiting, they said, if you look at the first part of that, in terms of their perspective of the international situations, they don't have to argue because they are more or less the same. So it's just the same words, same terms, even so, okay, no problem. But there are also areas, where China and India, I think, there are differences, certainly. In the regions, how they view how the India views the sort of the development of the relationship with, other South Asian countries, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and more importantly, how India views the relationship with Pakistan, because of the history, because of their difficult, relationship. And from the Indians' perspective, that is how China views the aspiration of India for a greater role, a major power role in terms of the UN Security Council. Sort of issues and a lot of things, right? Being China becoming a more, or even more, have a higher portfolio. Look at in terms of international relations and others. And for scholars, I think what fascinates them most is kind of a comparison, as you have increasingly seen, the so-called road of development, the model of them, which one is better, always fascinating. Economists, political scientists, because China believe that Chinese have said we are pursuing a road we call the socialism with Chinese characteristics. Well, you can have different jargon, whatever you would like. But for the Indians, they will say we are the largest democracy and we have our systems. So people, visiting, the two countries, you have totally different feelings, different understandings, right? They say, wow, look at the Chinese, they can do things, get things done. But look at the Indians, they are such a, to extent, chaotic, things. But they say, well, this is Indian, this is a democratic way doing this, so it have little sort of or fewer side effect. While the Chinese do something, if they made a mistake, that's going to be very huge, right? So there are a lot of things, a lot of interesting happen. Looking ahead, my personal argument, I would say that this relationship is very much important. The two governments, and I think the majority of the people would agree that this relationship is much more than, which will be more than a bilateral. So it is a relationship of we call the global and the strategic significance. This is obvious. And this relationship has to be well managed because there are so many issues that they could, bring problems to the relationship. As I mentioned earlier, like the bilateral issues. The boundary issues is one of them, but may not be the only one, because so far the two sides agreed that we have to work on the settlement, final settlement of the relationship in the context that they have already agreed a kind of we call the guiding principles and political parameters, that is something we have moved after the first stage, coming to the second stage. It's very difficult, but have to be patient. And pending the settlement of the boundary issues, the two sides agreed, pledged to work together for the development of other areas. We talk about trade, we talk about cooperation, consultation on international regional issues, so that the grounds will prepare, atmosphere will be improved, that coming to the stage, the boundary issues can properly addressed. That is very important understanding. And more importantly, looking ahead, that is how two rising powers, which have been living, which literally they are neighbors and they have so many conflict issues, how to foresee a vision that they can live with each other. I think the two leaders, and again, the majority view is that there are enough rooms in this, there's enough room in this world to accommodate the simultaneous development or rise of India. Of course, all these, I would say, are vision. All these are kind of sort of very, very visionary statement and yet to be put into test. But to conclude, I think, given the importance of relationship, we should be and we can be optimistic about that. The nuclear issue is really always, I think, very difficult. Difficult not only for China, I think difficult for the world, because it has literally touched on two issues. The first issue, which is very important, is the non-proliferation issues. We understood very well, I assume people at this, or the audience knows very well, in 1998, India, it was India, which first, tested the nuclear, made the nuclear testing, right? And then it was followed by the Pakistan. And of course, UN sanctions, resolutions, condemnations, a lot of things were done. And it was initiated, of course, with the United States. And of course, there's a unanimity in the international community, and as shown by the Security Council resolution. So nuclear non-proliferation issues, that is clear. But there's also, I think, an understand argument of countries like India and Pakistan, that the need and the right to use for sort of civilian use of nuclear technology, because literally with the development of India and Pakistan, and there's an increasing demand for power supply, and anybody who goes to India and Pakistan, you will be really frustrated by the cut and frequent, the shortage of power. In this part of the world is very, very hot and humid. So imagine you go around, you see almost every store and every family who can afford to put the generator there. So in case the problem, they use that. So this is then a kind of balance. Yeah, it's a kind of balance. It's a kind of a dilemma for I think each member of the international community. That is, on the one hand, you have the non-proliferation issues. This is they got the countries, or be it in the NPT regime. I know these two countries that they never signed the NPT, but they got still remain. They got the commitment. They got the responsibility that they should, follow the NPT non-proliferation sort of regulations. On the other hand, other side, the question of that is, say, the right of peaceful use of nuclear technology. So I only hope that all these two issues can be, a delicate balance can be strengthened. And China, the position, my understanding, is taken, in light of these development, and which feel that, its position should be good, certainly help the strengthening of the NPT regime in the meantime, while understanding and recognize the need of the two countries, the right to use use of the technology, nuclear technology. I think on this particular issue, China and the U.S. has a quite a good level of consultation and understanding, and we only hope that when the China's sort of nuclear cooperation of the civilian use of nuclear technology with Pakistan can also be better understood by India, by United States, and the international community, because that is totally, I think, China is being followed fully, not against any Chinese sort of commitment to the NPT regime, and we only hope that Pakistan's need of China's cooperation with Pakistan in this, number one, I think, follows the rules. It is not against the rules. It helps the rules and the NPT regime. In the meantime, it also helps Pakistan to meet its growing need of technologies. I think China, the official position, as I can see, is that this is a dispute. As I said, a dispute left over by history, left over. If you check the history, the partition. Yeah, they simply cannot agree on which side they should go. And as a matter of fact, Kashmiri, the prince, he thought he could manipulate capitalize this sort of moment so that they can seek independence, or an independent status, which it turned out totally opposite. So, and unfortunately brought the newly independent country into the First War. Since then, 2 wars were fought, and there's at least 2 occasions would otherwise could have brought the 2 countries into the first ever nuclear clashes since the end of World War II. One was in 1999, the so-called Kargil sort of conflict. It was a small island, part of the part. I mean, it's a terrain. I mean, bordering the line of actual control of the Kashmir. And the second occasion was after the September 11th unfortunate incident. I mean, the terrorist attacks, and then there was the terrorists organizations would like to want to create troubles by, I mean, launching attacks, terrorist attacks on the Indian parliament. So it's literally provoke the 2 arch rivals into a confrontation, as the Indians, Pakistan call them eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation, mobilizing 1 million troops. That also have, I mean, later on you check the books and that says they force, I mean, putting the danger of the 2 countries, I mean, into a kind of nuclear conflict. Yeah, this is an area I think are going to cause some concerns on the possible sort of, not a conflict, but possible sort of misunderstanding, because both China and India have a quite sort of ambitious, to some extent, right, military modernization program, and that is natural. China is developing, interest is expanding, and it has to, right, develop some power to modernize its military. This is the military modernization is we call one of the 4 modernizations. I mean, Deng Xiaoping has said. I mean, in 1980, when China started reform and opening up. For Indians, again, it's, I mean, giving its positions, giving its, I mean, the perception of a security threat, I think it is also pursue a kind of quite large military modernization program by buying, developing various advanced cutting-edge technologies, I mean, or military wares. And the relationship, military cooperation relationship with the United States, Israel, others are being very, I think, good and quite deep. So then the maritime issues, the Indian Ocean issues, could become an issue if the 2 sides do not manage them well. But again, I would say that this is only kind of process of, I mean, it's kind of issues people, I mean, might, I mean, have problem. But my sense is that, as I said, the previous question raised that the 2 sides know very well, the 2 countries know very well that it got to concentrate itself for development rather than competing the sphere of interest, let alone confrontations. Look at what the Soviet Union did with the United States, I guess. Yes, that is the lesson China and India should learn from them very well. China knows India, the rise of India and the significance of its sort of a rise very well. That's why people like us are very busy. we travel around, try to tell, and I mean, try to get an idea, and then we have research projects, and very happy about that. 10 years ago, people like us say, "What you guys? What are you doing?" India, which country? So people don't understand, and they don't care. But now, because of relationship, because of the importance, and particularly the impression that, and the sort of interest for the success of India, and certainly I think the business interest, a lot of things happen. So we understand very well, and the importance vis-a-vis, I think, India too. And the United States, again, I think understand the relationship, the importance of have a proper, good relationship, steady relationship with both China and India very well. And that is also, I think, very clear. And as you may know, that the president, I don't know whether it's your president or president of the United States, Obama is visiting India in November. This is going to be a very important visit. And it's a hope that they can help to put the relationship in the deeper and wider sort of areas. So, but the idea or the thinking of having a kind of a trilateral relationship is, I would say, you have to be very careful. After all, international relationship is not a geometry. And we are living in a kind of sort of interdependent world. So there's a lot of interrelated interests. So in other words, the so-called, we call it the zero-sum games. The development relationship of this part of this pair does not necessarily mean the loss of that relationship. So it's a kind of very complicated relationship. It has to be really managed. So talking about if there's any triangle, I would say it has to be very well managed and managed in a very nuanced way. I'm not sure whether India, I would hesitate to say India is viewed as a threat for China's development or rise, and both official levels and sort of public opinion. You never found that there's such a majority or very sort of a precise statement. But I would argue that, my understanding is by my interactions, both with scholars or people around the street or people who feel, who have the interest of these issues, said this is India is a factor we have to to take into consideration. We should have to take into our calculation if we want to rise. As I said, as I tried to argue this afternoon, that we need a peaceful, stable international environment, particularly, I think, at the neighborhood, the periphery, and India being one of the largest countries in the region. So this is being very clear. The public opinion is certainly, I think, is playing an increasingly important role in helping sort of shaping the policy, but not in a role that, as I would argue, that every country, no, wow, we have to care of, but that's necessarily the decisive, or the only factor. Indians, newspapers have been, I think, neutrally for its, activities, everything like that. Indians always said proudly that if you ask 100 Indians, they have 101 opinions. So. But this, of course, for Chinese, it takes us a few years, at least more than 10 years to understand that. We used to thought, this newspaper, India Press, say there's a view, op-ed against China. We got to talk to them. We got to make a representation of them. And the Indians too. Yeah, well, I remember when I was early years at the institute, there's some publications, papers by my colleagues, on our journal. Then the Indian embassy people we pick up the call, you guys, what are you writing about? No, we have different views. So Chinese public opinion is developing, it is coming to that stage. The reason actually it's simple, because China is becoming more open. There's more freedom, if I can say, or more ready. People would like to speak up their minds, which that means that normal, yeah. And in the past, that kind of debate, that kind of differences were taken place or aired in closed door like that. It never come out. So I think in understanding, in watching these debates, you have to take into consideration of the general picture that is China, and both China and India are undertaking or experiencing great unprecedented transformation, both in political and social fields. I think the simple answer is that India is only one of the aspirants for that issue. Right? There are a lot of issues, as well as Brazils, Japanese, Germans, they're also talking about the Europeans. They're having too many, right? The EU, why? Because what's wrong? Yeah. So this is a problem, right? Everybody feels, yes, that got to be reformed, but how? And who is coming? Who should be included? That is a problem. I think the Chinese position so far, the general position on this issue is that this has to be reformed, efficiency, effective has to be improved, and the representation of developing countries, and Africa in particular, has to be improved, increased, right? And on the particular issue of India's, I think, candidature or as I mean on these issues, if you check the official document, it's also been very clear. They say understand their aspirations, support, yeah, and they play a greater role in UN, including right, UN Security Council. That's it. Yeah, my personal understanding is that if there's a consensus among at least starting with the aspirants, right? Then I think countries, there are countries, but I don't know. Let's see, we have to work it out.